I'm suited up with this.
Oh, you're going to do the intro first?
He's going to put on his pocket iron first and left front pocket.
Although what I feel like I should get is a little dongle so that I can like
Up and down, left, right.
go somewhere else, because it could be the camera that's jacking it all up to you.
That's true. Lots of metal parts.
Maybe I don't know if
What?
it goes through your head.
Yeah.
It's part of the
I'm going to turn on audio.
Sounds good.
And I'm going to remove the title card. Because I know how to do that. Oh, there we go. I'm going to get it right. All right.
Hello.
Hi, everybody.
Hi,
How's it
JavaScript.
going? Happy Wednesday.
If folks in the back could slowly make your way towards our chairs.
Yeah.
And etc. But we'll start meanwhile. I'm Anna Baker. Welcome. Gotten online and need to. We have Wi-Fi, space 150-guest. Password is agency150. So feel free to hop on that.
Yeah. So as you might have surmised, Space 150 is this place, the place where you are. We are a digital agency that provides a variety of services, from the traditional agency stuff that you might see with things like TV ads, but we also have a really strong digital component too. I'm an engineer here. One of our presenters, Mr. Jonathan Stearman, is also an engineer here. And we do work for folks like Nike, Buffalo Wild Wings, American Express, brands you might have heard of. We're, on behalf of Space, we're super excited to have you all here. Hope you enjoy the surroundings and whatnot. A couple of logistical notes. If while talks are going on, you need to get outside for any reason, there's actually a second door kind of behind this archway here and to your left. And if you just follow that hallway back, it actually connects to this hallway. So if you need to use the restroom or anything, restrooms are here and here behind this wall.
You can also use this door.
You
Just
can
if you don't want to
totally
walk
use
in
it.
front of everybody
Yeah.
and be awkward, there's one in the back too.
Yeah, it's an innovation from last time, which I don't know why I'm saying during the sponsor read, but brains. Next sponsor, please. Thank you.
Okay, so one of our platinum sponsors is Twilio. For those of you that don't know what Twilio is, it's probably the leading platform for communications and video APIs. It's widely used. One of the guys that is in the leadership there now was actually an original founder of this group, so we have long-time ties. And if you don't use it or you don't know what it is, you should definitely go check it out. It's a wonderful thing to learn.
Another of our sponsors is Track.js, provider of JavaScript error tracking and monitoring services. It's actually based right here in Stillwater, Minnesota. Todd from Track.js is another member of our community who's been super supportive to this group. If you've been a long-time member of JSMN, you might remember his presentations here. But Track.js is a really awesome solution if you're looking for ways to figure out what's going on with your code when it's running in production on other people's computers and on other people's websites. So, highly recommend it.
Cool. Front-End Masters is another local business that offers subscriptions, is the word, subscriptions to different trainings on a whole variety of different front-end technologies. They're great for pretty much anything you want to learn from any level, beginners all the way up to if you need something new and interesting, if you're an expert. I see heads shaking in the back for an endorsement. And if you happen to be free and you look on their website, they have workshops that are either like a day or half a day or 2 days, and you can go check those out for free if you want to be there in person, which is a cool thing to do if you're just looking to shop around and check them out.
We'd also like to thank another of our platinum sponsors, C.H. Robinson. I know we have some folks from C.H. Robinson here tonight, and if they'd like to say any words, they're welcome to. Otherwise, I can give my usual spiel. What do you say, Brian?
No pressure.
All right. I'll give my usual spiel then. C.H. Robinson is an international provider of logistics services that happens to be based right here in beautiful, historic Eden Prairie, Minnesota. 99% visible anyway. No, that was bad. Sorry. But C.H. Robinson has been a really strong ardent supporter of this group for a very long time. And their IT group in particular have been really awesome supporters of this group. So thank them for their continued support. We'd also like to thank Doherty, a consulting firm out of Bloomington, for their continued support of JavaScript as well.
In terms of social media, you obviously all found us, but we are on pretty much everything. We have a website, javascriptmn.com, that you can go check us out on and get updates and meetup information, contact the organizers, etc., etc. We have a YouTube channel, so we are always live streaming this meetup, this performance, this experience. If you're ever not able to make it in person, you can check us out live and send us questions and things and actually interact live if you want to. Otherwise, you can check it out after the fact as well. We are on Slack, and you can always tweet at us at JavaScriptMN. We'd like to do a little blurb and invite people, especially new people, because people who have been here for a while have heard us say this a few times. But if you're new, we are always looking for speakers for this group. We do different formats, both lightning talks that are kind of like 10, 15 minutes, just kind of blurbs on whatever you're learning, just a quick talk, or longer, in-depth, like 45-minute to an hour talks if you have something more substantial that you want to present to the group. This is a really, really great platform to share your knowledge and practice your speaking skills. It's one of, if not the biggest tech group in Minnesota. I think that's still
depending on the week, it like changes. It's like between us and DevOps.
It's a great platform to get your face up in front of a lot of people and practice your speaking skills. If you're interviewing, or even if you're learning something new and have been in the industry for a while and you want to make sure you really know it well enough to explain it, this is your group.
This group also has a code of conduct. So by attending JavaScript events or participating in online spaces like the Slack, you agree to abide by a code of conduct, which is on our website. The aim of our code of conduct is to make sure that these spaces that we create are places where all of our attendees can feel welcome and can feel safe. If there's ever anything that we organizers can do to make you more comfortable, whether that rises to the level of our code of conduct report, or whether it's as simple as adjusting seating arrangements or something like that, you can always feel free to reach out to us individually or through the email address here. Anna and I are probably the most visible ones because we're the ones up here frequently. Yeah, just feel free to reach out to us however you feel comfortable. Thing to note about code of conduct reports is that they're always confidential to the organizers. So if you have any questions about that, feel free to reach out to us too. We're happy to answer.
We like to open up the floor for announcements before we start talking for the night. This is a place where we do invite recruiters if they want to come, but we also have job seekers and just people in the community that have announcements. Does anyone have anything they'd like to share? Right at the back.
Hi, my name is Paul Bettings. I'm an headhunter on Twitter. I am day 3 in the working with the guys, folks out at Dispatch. Dispatch is a startup here in town. Did a $2.7 million Series A funding a month or 2 ago. There's going to be another rather significant announcement sometime between now and the middle of December. And so an engineering team currently of 4 that will probably get to 12 by the time we get to the end of January. So if anybody wants to talk about that, JavaScript, React, Ruby, anyone who has dabbled in some mobile software would help too. So it's kind of that catch-all at the beginning. Companies are around 45 or so here in town, in Bloomington. And if anybody wants to talk about like startup week, career sort of things, like I always love talking about that stuff too. And I'll be here till the end. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Jason?
I'm Jason Sue, and I'm looking for a position in Ruby on Rails, and I am proud to say that I now have experience untangling spaghetti code. I didn't refactor it so much as build a parallel path, which allows me to make the changes I wanted without having to break the code path that I didn't like, but did at least work.
Cool.
Right on. A very
Thank you.
relatable feeling, for sure. Yeah. We'll
Thank you, Jason.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
Go for it.
I'm Daniel. Now I'm a Rails and Vue.js developer with about 3 years experience. I also do a lot of UI and UX design, and newly in the market looking for my next position. So you're after.
And you're also in the Slack, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, that was me.
Awesome. Very cool. Welcome.
Thanks.
I have an announcement. There's a meetup group you might have heard of. It's called Minneapolis Junior Devs. I know I've seen some faces here, some folks I've met at Minneapolis Junior Devs, and some folks who've come back here since. It's a really great event. I think there are a couple of tickets left for their November event. So if you're looking to connect with junior developers, or you are a junior developer, I'd highly recommend checking that out. The website for that is mplsjrdevs.com. And of course, Minneapolis isn't the name, but anyone from anywhere in town, anywhere in the state, anywhere in the country, really, I guess, if you want to fly in for it, by all means, more power to you. But you're definitely absolutely welcome. So cool to see folks over there. I think that event is the
It's a Tuesday, yeah.
That sounds like a Tuesday. We'll go with that.
Cool. Any other announcements for the floor?
Yeah, time for our short talks.
Okay, so tonight we have a whole series of all lightning talks.
Yeah.
And the first one is, oh,
Sorry.
do we have first? Yeah, I know, I was waiting for your slide.
Oh, no slide.
I thought you were starting to like, oh, that you wanted to do that.
Well, we can do it now.
Okay, come on up. We have an announcement for you all. Sorry about that.
That was supposed to be under announcements. Okay.
Oh,
sorry.
yeah.
I'm confused.
This
This is what happens when you micromanage.
That's all good. We've macromanaged the micromanaging. It's all good.
I appreciate it. First of all, where's Robert?
I think he's probably downstairs making sure people can see.
Robert is hiding.
Yep.
A couple years ago, I can't remember how long ago, but a couple years ago, I think it all works better if I wear these over that, does it?
Perfect.
A couple years ago, Kevin Winery, who basically, if you sort of appreciate where this group is in terms of numbers and support and the community and whatnot, I'd have to give him the most amount of credit. He sort of took what was a dwindling, if non-existent group and sort of rebirthed it, as it were, and sort of built it up. From that time, we went from Dev Jam, we went over to what was Coco, we went over to Olsen, and we came our way over to here. It's been a nice little journey, and we've grown by leaps and bounds, but I give him all the credit in the world. A couple of years ago, he was ready to step out, and I told him I would take over, along with a couple of others. And within that time, we've sort of formalized. We are a nonprofit with the state. You have a board of directors, and your board of directors consists of Anna here, Brandon here, Robert, who is hiding, but doing a good job entertaining the security guard and making sure people can get in, and myself, president of your board of directors. At the end of this year, I will be stepping down as president, and Robert will be stepping down as his position on the board. I feel like in order to make sure this group continues to do good things, to grow, and to change and to evolve, it's good to get new blood in here. I totally appreciate what the rest of the organizers have done and have brought to the table, and I would like to see what can happen as new organizers come forward. So starting at the end of this year, there's going to be 2 board members available for this particular group. We are going to post a link in the Slack channel for those of you who are interested to fill out a form. I encourage you to, if you are interested, if you feel like you have ideas, can bring some to the table, or are interested in just giving back. Maybe you're in a position of, within your company or something like that, and you feel like that you can, give back in such fashion, that would be great too. We're not necessarily looking for sponsorships or anything like that. I say necessarily, it's the end of the year, anything can happen with our current sponsorships. But it's more hands-on, helping get this organized, coming up with ideas, finding speakers, or out-of-the-box stuff. I don't think I'm going to mention to you the things that you could bring to the table, because that's the whole reason we want you to come to the table, is because I can't think of it. So I really do encourage anyone and everyone who might be interested to join. It is not a lot of work unless you want it to be. It is not a lot of pressure unless you want it to be. We welcome people who want to put in the work and have the pressure. Yes, go ahead.
Can I just say, you don't have to be a JavaScript expert with 18 years of experience or anything like that. Brand new people, you're fresh out of prime, something like that. Jump in.
Totally. When I joined the board of JSMN, before we had a formal board, I was a second-year student at the University of Minnesota. I wasn't even studying computer science. I just kept showing up to these events. And gosh darn it, I keep showing up to these events. So if that sounds like a thing that you found yourself doing too, we don't have any totes, but we could. And if that's your idea,
Socks.
that's great.
Anybody?
Another thing I'll say about the form, it's sometimes when people say, "Oh, just fill out this form," that sounds like it might be a long form. This is not a long form. It's like your name, your email address, any words you want to say, and I think that field's optional. And then submit. So if you're interested in the
that's why I call it a form. It's not an application. It's a form.
Yep.
And it's just so we can get to know who might be interested. It's not too much of a formal application process. Our bylaws, I don't believe, are on our our GitHub, however they should be.
We should probably put those.
But basically, we have bylaws. We have to have an election. We're going to have that election at the end of the year. It's going to be a very informal process. We will attempt to be very transparent about it in terms of how we're going to go about doing it. But this is also something that will be happening every year based on our structure and our bylaws. So, is someone raising their hand? I don't. Okay.
Yeah. Are there any questions? Not that you guys aren't.
Yeah.
People get cool Mario shirts and hats.
Yes, absolutely, 100%.
You
You
can
can
pass
believe
it.
me on that.
Pass that.
Yeah, there's like that's actually part of the bylaws. Is like he has to give you,
And that's-
he has to toss the hat, right? Yeah,
Just email Brandon and he will get you squared away 100%.
Exactly. Yeah.
Look, we're actually in a fairly good place, and actually, I feel a need to mention this. Over the past few years, since incorporating, becoming a nonprofit, sort of dialing up the ask for sponsorships and whatnot, despite the fact that you may not show in the luxurious pizza you're getting every day, we do have a bit of a budget too. There are things that we can do, so we're not totally helpless, and we are looking for those ideas as well. So feel free, and even if you don't want to be an organizer, your ideas are still most certainly welcome, because we do this, with your consent for the most part, because the fact that you show up is why we do this. But at the same time, we're literally flying by the seat of our pants and judging how well we do our job based on, your feedback and you guys showing up. And for the most part, we don't get a lot of feedback other than people showing up. We see how much pizza's left at the end of the evening, and that's how we get a head count based on how many people we think showed up. So feel free to ping us in Slack, email us, slip us a note, anything like that you feel like we could help do our job better. And for me, you can do that for the next 2 months.
And if you have any questions offline of us regarding turning in an application or a submission or
Yes.
whatever, we'd be happy to answer those as well.
So I appreciate all that. On a personal note, the second reason why I'm stepping down is because I do have my own consulting firm, Lakeside Studios. I've never really much, attempted to market myself through this group. Maybe occasionally I brought it up. A few times. This will be the last and largest time, hopefully, that I bring it up because we are sort of in the midst of doing a lot of projects. Not to mention that if you are people out there who need talented people on your stuff, feel free to reach out. Angular development, React development, mobile apps, anything of that nature. I'd be more than interested to reach out and talk to you. I can be reached through Slack. I can be reached through meetup.com. Those are the two main places that it's a good place to reach me. Mostly Slack, honestly. So be happy to hear from any of you regarding Organizer, regarding this meetup, regarding if you're looking for employment or if you need expert people on your project or anything like that. All right? Thank you guys very much, and it's honestly been an honor to sort of helm this for the past few years, and I really appreciate everyone continuing to show up on a weekly or monthly basis. Thank you guys.
Okay, now we have our first lightning talk, and it is Jonathan Stearman with Spooky Weird JavaScript. Round of applause for that.
Try your best that I go first because I'm going to mess up the whole AV system.
That's all right. I got your back, buddy.
Perfect.
And then the one where.
Yeah, so left side. And this goes somewhere up top. Ooh. Can you hear me now? Yeah? We're gonna do that, just leave it there? Alright, so I'm now tethered. Very dangerously. Alright. Oop. Whoop. Oh, skip some slides though. Back to slide 1. Sweet. All right, that's working. Hey, yeah, as Brandon mentioned, my name is Jonathan Stearman. I work here at Space 150. So Brandon and I were just chatting in Slack like we usually do on our work days, just kind of having fun, you know, typing stuff up. And I made some weird comment about, oh my God, Brandon, because I work in JavaScript maybe like 10, 20% of my time. I'm like, Brandon, what is this doing? This is so weird. JavaScript, this thing, I don't even remember what it was, but this thing was so weird. Like, I'm used to not having stuff work like this. He was like, hey, you should give a talk about it. I'm a board member at JSMN. I'm like, being the Minnesotan that I am, I just couldn't say no. So here we are. So a little background. My official title here at Space 150 is Research Engineer. So I don't actually spend a whole lot of time doing JavaScript. I do a lot of back-end work, C#. I've done a little bit of Java. Way back in the day, I did cold fusion development and ActionScript. But these days, it's mostly back-end server work with a mix of like Arduino, Pi, Internet of Things, kind of building exhibits and stuff. But as everyone knows, Node.js has been just coming out blazing fast on the IoT realm. So as I spend more and more time building these things with Arduinos and Pis, half the time, I start writing stuff in Node, which for me was a little bit new. So I don't say this to like impress anyone and say, hey, look at all the stuff I can do. I kind of say this to say, I probably know JavaScript the least out of everyone in this room, you guys being JavaScript developers day to day. So with that said, if you're new to JavaScript, hopefully this presentation will give you some kind of gist about some things you can expect as far as quirks with the language if you're used to working in more static languages like C# or Java. And if you're an experienced developer, maybe this will give you some insight as to what new people to JavaScript will think about the language when you introduce them to it. So the agenda for today, I'm going to go over a little bit about type coercions in JavaScript. Then we're going to move on into some quirks with the Boolean operators. We're going to spend a little bit of time talking about that mystical little thing called the ASI that's always running kind of under the hood in JavaScript. And we're going to finish up with a quick little demo of a JavaScript encoder that I found that does some weird stuff. So first off, though, we are going to talk about type coercion. So this is pretty basic stuff as far as JavaScript and languages go, if statements, right? So first off, me coming from static languages background, I look at these first couple lines and I'm like, wait, and you've got an if statement. Great, those are usually expecting Boolean conditions, right? What is an empty string? You can do that? Like, that's a real thing you can do? I can pass objects in there, I can pass arrays in there, I can put new strings, objects, anything, and it all just magically gets qualified into a Boolean? That's a little weird. I don't even know where some of these decisions like came from even. So like, who decided that an empty array was, you know, falsy or truthy? Who decided that a new string is truthy or falsy? And then there's some weird little equivalencies too, like empty string actually does equate to 0 because of the type coercion. Empty string being falsy and 0 being falsy. So falsy equals falsy, right? You get true, which is kind of crazy. And then, so it took me a little while to realize that, oh, okay, there's a little stuff going on under the hood there. And then eventually, you know, after a few minutes of Googling, you find out that you have to do this identity equals to do, does it equal value and type? But even that, I found a little kind of quirk with it, especially on line 8, which I actually thought was probably the most interesting one out of all of these little examples here. So infinity equals infinity, not that big of a deal, right? That's usually things equal themselves. That's something I'm used to. Null equals null, true, yep. That's a thing. Not a number. I did do some ActionScript work, so I was kind of familiar with how not a number works. But that still is kind of like that magical black hole of what exactly is not a number? Is it everything that's not a number? Is it a specific thing that's not a number? It's kind of like infinity like that. 5, the type of null, I thought that was a little bit surprising. If you say type of null, it will actually tell you that null is an object type, which I guess it could be considered a reference of an object type, but anyway, there it is. Line 7, not surprising, true as expected. Line 8 is that super kind of weird one, though. A new string reference, if you type that into a console with the same value equals another new string reference with the same value, doesn't actually equal itself, which I thought was very strange because in the docs, I vaguely recall it saying if it's the same value and the same type, that's the definition of an identity equals. But turns out that that's a little weird. So yeah, if anyone wants to correct me after this meeting and tell me why that actually happens, I would love to know. And then the last two demos are just quick little examples of type coercion where you can actually do some weird things with numbers and strings that I'm not accustomed to seeing. So normally, whenever I write code like this in my C# or Java days, the compiler is going to yell at me pretty hard if I try to multiply the string of 7 by the number 3. So that to me seemed a little weird. But hey, this is JavaScript, man. You can do anything. You can do whatever you want. And for the most part, it works, which is one of the reasons that I keep coming back to JavaScript, is that it just, yeah, it's got some quirks, but it's also pretty cool. And you can do really, really powerful things with it. So next up, we're going to talk a little bit about Boolean operators. Very, very little bit. So what surprised me the most coming from, again, you're going to hear me say this a million times, the static language background. When I read this, the first thing I thought was, oh, OK, I'm going to assign the value of true to not a Boolean, because true is true, and 42, which is truthy, would equate to true, and true would equal true. But it turns out that's not how JavaScript works. And you get the answer of 42. I believe it returns the last thing that fails in that set. We'd have to actually read the docs for that. But when I read that, I was just like, you can do this? JavaScript, man, it's magical. Just all sorts of crazy stuff that you can do with that. And then again, yep, Boolean, still false, another example. But it turns out this is actually super, super useful, particularly when you have to do things on one line, which a lot of the times in JSX, if you have this big, huge, lots of lines of code that you have to write, it really clutters up the code. But being able to do this kind of, chaining with the ampersand, the bitwise operators, or Boolean operators there, it makes your code a lot cleaner, makes it a ton easier to write. Like if I was going to write this in like C or C#, it would have taken me a little bit longer to do that. So very cool.
Hey, can you do me a favor? Can you go back 2 slides for a second? Pretend you're talking.
Talking.
There.
Pretending.
Thank you.
Totally there. That's what we're here for. All right. So that was Boolean operations. So the ASI, way back in the day when I first started learning JavaScript, I put semicolons everywhere just because, hey, C# and Java background. That's what you do, right? You throw semicolons at the end of all your statements. And eventually, I get carried over to my JavaScript code when I wrote that. And I would notice, because I'm not a perfect developer, I have bugs, that occasionally I would forget to add a semicolon. And I usually wouldn't even realize it. I'd run the code would run, the code would usually work. And then I'd come back to this file that I'd written 2 months ago and be like, oh, I missed a semicolon on line 30. But somehow my code still worked and nothing complained. And being the naive developer that I was back in the day, I just kind of said, oh, this is quirks mode. Just like HTML, the browser's just trying to be nice, play nice with me, and just kind of say, oh, I'm going to run this the best that I can. I'm just going to figure it out. Turns out that is not the case. I had seen an email somewhere where someone had forwarded me about a topic called the ASI, automatic semicolon insertion. And I found out this was actually part of ECMAScript. Like, it's standard. It's not just the browsers all doing it on their own. It's not some quirks mode that just kind of lives out in the ether. This is something that's defined part of the ECMAScript standard. If you're writing a JavaScript engine, you have to implement automatic semicolon inclusion. Which I thought was super weird, just because I'm not used to seeing that. But what that means, a couple demos here. This line right here, the ASI does not actually trigger. If you put your return statement and then what you actually want it to return on the next line, which I don't advise doing this in this example, but this is the textbook example of what the ASI won't do for you. But the ASI actually interprets that as a semicolon after line 2. And then you just return, you get undefined. So that's a pitfall of the ASI, is that it tries to do its job, it tries to run your code, but if you're not careful about where you put your carriage returns, it can definitely bite you there. Yep, same thing. So this one here, also, a lot of the time when I Googled the ASI features and how it actually worked, a lot of people are saying, oh, I'm just going to add semicolons everywhere and it'll fix it. That actually is not true, not all the time at least. So this particular example, even if you tell the interpreter, I'm going to put a semicolon after 42, that still doesn't save you. The ASI is still going to trigger, and it's going to put a semicolon or return statement right after line 2 on the return. And you're still going to get undefined back, even though you had manually said, I want the statement to end on line 3. Little catch, little weird thing. So there you go. Like he was saying, to fix this, you can either wrap it in parens, line 2 through 4 right there. Or if you just want, if it's short enough that you can keep it on one line, you can just do that as well. Then the ASI doesn't really trigger. So that was one example of where the ASI can get a little weird. But unfortunately, as Demi Lovato says, it gets worse. There are definitely more things that are a little quirky with the ASI that are harder to spot. So this is one, not that I've written myself. This is, again, just textbook definition. You can go to Wikipedia to find this example. But if I'm just skimming code, it's pretty easy to see like that dangling 42 on the carriage return on the previous example. This one's a little more insidious, where you have to really be paying attention to actually spot where the ASI is going to trip you up. So what this actually gets interpreted to right there is that it kind of merges lines 2 and 3. The ASI does not put a semicolon after line 2, as you might think it would. So you'll get an undefined error in this case, which I thought was a little sketchy, and which is why when I saw that, I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to start putting semicolons everywhere. And then I found the previous example and found out that doesn't actually help you. But to fix this, it is pretty easy, and you do have to add a semicolon. If you want to do this particular example, you can put a semicolon at the end of line 2 or at the beginning of line 3. It doesn't actually matter if you have a style guide reason whether you want that to happen one way or the other. That's a valid point. But you do need to actually separate those statements out somewhere. So after I read that, and after I read some of the rules, I was like, oh man, I really want to turn this off. All my code has semicolons anyway. I just want JavaScript to run the code that I want it to run. And I spent way too much time trying to find a way to turn that off, because it turns out you can't turn it off. It's an actual feature of ECMAScript. It's part of the library. It's always been there, and it will always be there. So unfortunately, depending on your point of view, you just have to learn the rules to it. The nice part about it is that it's not terribly complicated, the rules that they put forward. But I will say, reading that ECMAScript standard, the 262 PDF down there, is a pretty heavy read. I didn't think that was the most reader-friendly way to write what the rules do, but there it is in the standard stock. Brendan Ike has a much better walkthrough about kind of the pitfalls of the ASI, why he wrote it, and a more human parsable examples for how the rules actually function. So if you're looking for something to do tonight while you're giving candy away, go read that guy. And finally, we are going to finish up with this lovely JavaScript program, which is, God, see, one of the reasons I love JavaScript. Like, a C# program like this? What? That wouldn't do anything. Compiler would yell at me for days. But JavaScript, we can do it. We can do it, guys. So type coercion. This is really just, you could call it a super effective use of type coercion, but it's actually just kind of strange. So the empty array, in the end, it results down to 1, and I'm not going to walk through all the rules about what it goes to. We can just throw it in the compiler and let the computer actually do the work for us. But, so what we're going to do is actually do this. So I found this lovely website. If I can bring it up over here. Yeah, so I found this while I was trying to, I was doing research on JavaScript hacks, and somehow this came up. Can I bump the font size up on this? So this is a JavaScript encoder, where you can input arbitrary JavaScript. Any JavaScript you want. You can make for loops, while loops, variable declarations, lets, consts, all the syntax sugar that you want, as long as it's baseline JavaScript. And this encoder will take it and give you something that looks like this. JavaScript, guys. the best. It's so cool. And it works based off those rules of type coercion. Is kind of how it works under the hood. So I was testing this out, and I was like, oh, man, how does this even work? Because, OK, I see alert here. And I'm used to running minifiers. And if you run minifiers, it usually compresses it down a little bit. It might change some variable names, change a big variable name to just the letter A. And it might do that stuff. But generally, if you look at your minified code, the general syntax is still there. You can still see the var declarations. You can still see let. You can still see const. You can still see your for loops, your while loops. But with this thing, all that's gone. There is no syntactic sugar at all in here. No vars, no consts, nothing. Just a big string of goop. So I suppose I should run this for you guys to actually show you that it works and I don't just make this stuff up. So the easy demo right here is the one that it comes with. We can just hit eval. Thunk. Hey, look at that. We got our alert. Pretty sweet. But that's not a super compelling demo. So we got to give it something a little bit harder. If I can open up my demo tab. Come on. All right. So I just went to CodePen and tried to find some JavaScript-only pens. And this is one that I found. Oh, this one's way better on my laptop. Sweet. All right, so this is pure JavaScript. No HTML. We don't care about the CSS. So that's fine. So let's just take this arbitrary JavaScript code. We're just going to copy it. I think that says copy. Oh, God, I can't see behind myself. Go over here. Paste that in there. And I think there's something up here I had to do. Yeah, I didn't know what that was. But that breaks it for whatever reason. So we're going to take that out. But it's still arbitrary JavaScript. JJ code that guy. Look at that, lovely stuff. But again, no actual syntax for var, no const, no variable definitions, just lots of $signs and slashes. And there we go. This blew my mind the first time I read this. I was like, no way. No way, guys. How does this work? And I'm sure some smart people here actually know legitimately how this works.
What is this thing supposed to do?
So the idea was that you could write obfuscated JavaScript. So it's essentially kind of a hacking tool where someone would say, all right, I've written this hack, but I want to kind of hide it somewhere. I want it to not be immediately visible what this does. So if you were going to say hide an eval statement, we can write eval in that plain text there and encode it to this. And if you run it through some server-side check that strips out evals, it's not going to find any because they're not there. But it will still run eval. Yeah?
Is it possible to reverse this?
Yes. Yes, yes. So I scroll down, but way at the top, they actually say, hey, this is not actually that useful as an attack. If someone's looking for this attack, they will find it. So that's kind of why they say it's too easily detected. And it's browser dependent. They've got some of that stuff. And again, it's not a robust obfuscation because it is easily reversible. Yeah?
Yeah, I've seen this before. I don't know all the details, but I know the same strategy was used almost in the late 90s eBay to run illegal or banned JavaScript on pages.
Yeah.
So I was going to create a script from the page. eBay created a filter. They basically filtered out alphanumeric characters. But they didn't really get
See any numbers? Yep. Yep, super crazy. And then they'd also they'd have these thrown in image tags. So they'd have a server where you put, you'd make this file as an SVG or a PNG or a JPEG, and then embed that JPEG in some email that you send out. Someone clicks that, it runs, fetches your file, which is actually JavaScript, not an image. For whatever reason, Outlook would run the JavaScript. And it was like, Outlook. Guys. But again, that was the 90s. They've gotten a lot better. We'll leave it at that. So yeah, that was the cool demo. If we did want to go even one more, just a super duper proof, here's another one that creates an SVG, again out of pure JavaScript. Where's my mouse? There it is. All right. We'll take that guy. That actually copy. Paste listed in there. I'm going to reload the page just to get rid of that ginormous thing that was in there, because that sucked up a lot of my CPU. And I believe this one worked just out of the box. Here you go. Arbitrary JavaScript running with just $signs, periods, underscores, pluses, and a few magical string slashes. Yeah, so I found that super spooky the first time I saw that. I was like, oh my god, this really is Sparta here. You can do anything. Look at that, just with arrays and a few strings. Super cool stuff. But yeah, that's all I had. Oh, you can't see my slides because I've got the thing in the other side. Somewhere. There we go. There it is. All right. Were there any more questions? Yeah.
What are some of the contemporary use cases of
Obfuscation?
obfuscation?
So from my research, which I've never actually had to do this from like a legal perspective, like I've never on any of the projects I've worked on had a legal team come to me and say, make sure no one can read this code. But that is kind of the gist of when obfuscation would be necessary, is if you want to hide something. So if I made some JavaScript code that could run on a server that could produce cold fusion, energy for free, and I didn't want to apply for a patent because then someone else could look at the patent, reverse engineer it, and build something else that could do the same thing. If I then obfuscated it, I could use it and not apply for a patent and be reasonably sure, assuming my obfuscation is good, that no one would be able to reverse engineer my product and sell it for themselves, reverse engineer it, that kind of thing. Yeah.
If you deliver anything to a user's browser, they can do anything.
This is true. Yep. Kind of the side conversation to that point that I always believe in is that there's always someone smarter than me. So no matter what I do, someone else is going to figure it out, and they're going to be like, oh, that guy's dumb. I can do this way better. Yeah. Anything else? Cool. Thanks, guys.
Awesome.
I try to close everything down.
Yeah, for sure. Actually, can I borrow your obfuscation conversation that kind of brought this up?
Oh, is that what it was?
Did you see this all, Jonathan? Here, I'll pull it up real quick. So there was this tweet that went around. Let's see if we can find it. Where here we'll bump this up in. So there's this person, this ostensibly the security researcher, that said, yeah, we just gotta get you on the wall here there. He made a little tiny thumbnail image on Twitter that contained a zip archive that contained a bunch of RAR archives that had the entire works of Shakespeare, and also it looked like this. Sorry, that's a little bit tiny there, so I'm going to bump it up a couple more. I still can't even really see it, but what it says, it's a picture of William Shakespeare, and it says, unzip me.
That's a risky click.
Yeah, and when I saw this, the first thing is like, I totally want to call his bluff, but also I want my computer to still be operational. So I didn't, and I let the internet do it for me.
Yeah,
he said,
that's a good approach.
He said, I tried reporting this to Twitter's bug bounty program, but it's hashtag not a bug, which
feature.
Yeah, which sounds really awesome because then you can do all sorts of things like install arbitrary code, like some people recommend here, by curling a tweet. Doesn't that sound like fun? That sounds great.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, and then he got to posting a source code, which is also a PDF. Yeah, it just gets better and better. So this is just some silly tweet somebody made, but it kind of reminded me of the same sort of thing. A lot of the same quirks. So.
Good stuff.
Well, thanks, Jonathan. That was awesome. Glad to get you up here. Yeah, one more round of applause, please. Thank you. While I'm messing with the AV equipment here real quick, I'd also like to welcome up our next presenter, who I met at Minneapolis Junior Devs, and since then he's been around JSMN a few times, doing some awesome stuff. Recently graduated from Khan Academy. J.K. Clark. level here, you can just kind of leave it all up. We're actually going to use this for the mic. So. Okay, cool. Hi, everyone. Let's get set up here. I just want to take a moment just to kind of look at you all for a second. I love public speaking, so thank you for the opportunity to continue to practice this skill. So right out of the gate, this is my program, but we're not going to look at the code too much tonight. But I just want to show you, this is what we make, this is what we do. But as developers and as people working to create solutions, we do much more than code. And so today, I want to pose a question, start a conversation, and hopefully inspire you with something that you can do to be effective in the world and to help your friends, families, and loved ones. Okay, so this presentation is about my solo project. Sorry. Okay, so this solo project that I worked on for my time during the boot camp that I went to. I just graduated last week, so I'm fresh to the scene. Just by another show of hands, is anyone in here experiencing a career transition, switching from one profession to another, just by a show of hands? So I'm willing to bet that most of you know what it's like to be in transition, and it's a really difficult place to be. Starting in a new career is challenging for so many reasons, and the biggest one is that you just don't know anyone, right? That's something we can all relate to. And so my application is designed to sort of address this issue and to figure out what can we do as human beings to facilitate this transition for one another. And it's done with the underlying belief that success in life comes from something more than just resumes and transcripts. We need each other. That's what it takes to be successful. So a little background story. So my name is Jaki. I get all sorts of pronunciations. My parents were creative namers. And I always say that it's pronounced like a door key. Before I became a developer, I was an artist. I still am an artist. I studied illustration, and I spent many years working as a professional commercial designer. That's my heart, and that's my first love. Before I started developing, I spent a lot of time on social media. It was my life. I really loved sharing and connecting with people, and I thought of it as a way to build relationships, and that's sort of how I engage with it nowadays. My primary medium of exchange was Tumblr, but I really loved using all of those platforms. The biggest thing that I learned from using applications like this is that relationships are at the heart of it, and sometimes we forget about that. It's one of the things that we're talking about nowadays, right, with Facebook and with the way that these things are influencing our lives. Most of us right now are using LinkedIn as a way to build a career. It's our way to show our work. It's our way to share with people the things that we've done. It's a way to communicate those skills, talents, and techniques that we've mastered or are working on. Right now, unemployment rates are going down, which is a great thing, right? But this also means that a lot of us are in this period of transition where perhaps if you didn't get a chance to start a career, like my generation, or if you're in transition, this is your first chance to sort of get things together, right? Get a job that's going to let you live and survive and take care of yourself really well. This is a big opportunity for a lot of people. We want to take advantage of this opportunity. So this is what the process of getting a job feels like. How many people can relate to this? Okay, there's a lot, right? I didn't even know, like, I just Googled all the things that I had to think about and do this week. And I realized that LinkedIn wasn't really addressing this mess. And the thing about applying for jobs and getting those opportunities is that you can show all of this skill, all this aptitude, all these things that you can do. But at the end of the day, you still need something more. There's another piece of this puzzle.
and that's relationships. And resumes do not show relationship. One thing that does show relationship are the letters of reference that we can get from our peers and from our coworkers, right? If you've ever worked at a job and someone has thought that you did a good job, you can always use them as a reference in the future. You give their name, their phone number, their email, all that sort of stuff. The challenge is that you have to remember those details. And if you're like me, you probably don't remember the last thing you ate. So remembering all those details can be really difficult. And the biggest thing before we jump into the quick demo is that we are not our resumes. We are more than that. We are a set of stories and a set of experiences and a set of interactions. And those interactions, I believe, are what it takes to show that you're a great person to work with. It sets the stage for what people should expect in the day-to-day life. So just jumping over to my application really quickly. I don't know how to make this bigger. Let's see if this does anything. Oh, perfect. Okay, so my application is pretty straightforward. So the first thing that you can do when you jump into my application is you can see all of your letters of recommendation. As you can see, my friend, Mr. Taco Cat, loves me a great deal. So he's written me a lot of recommendations. And the nice thing about this application is that you can have the letter of recommendation written here, and you can have their contact information. The big thing is that not everyone wants to be contacted, so they can indicate whether or not they want to do that. And then if they want to, they can even leave a quick video, like that. So another thing that you might want to do with this application is you might want to request a new letter of reference. So here you can see your friends. Patty Mayonnaise is one of my best friends. I'm just going to click her name and select next here. And then inside of this this little form here, I can send like a really quick cover letter sort of thing, like asking for what I need and explaining why I need it. And the other big thing is I can indicate some suggested keywords. So as most of you probably know, a lot of companies use what are called applicant tracking systems for picking out candidates, and these systems look for keywords. And so anytime you can get the people who you're using for reference to use these keywords, the better chance you have of sticking out. And so I'm just going to quickly write here a request. So please help me out. And also tell them that I'm smart and creative. Okay, and it's as easy as that. Okay, so another thing that you might need to do is you might need to fill out a request. Let's say one of your friends have reached out to you and they want you to be able to do the same thing for them. So you can just click here and you can see that Mr. Taco Cat has asked me to send a referral. And so you have three options here. The big thing is that you don't always necessarily want to write a referral for someone. You might have your own reasons, and so it is possible to decline. And the way that's done is very discreetly, in a way that's still respectful. But if you choose to fill out a request, it's very easy as well. So the big thing you can do is you can just write out the text that you want to say. Then you can also upload a video, which is a feature that I'm still working on. Currently, this looks not that great, so I need to style that a little bit more. But you can basically upload a video, and then you can also indicate whether or not you want to be indicated. And all of the details about your reference will be pulled from your user information, so they can automatically see that stuff. So aside from that, the other thing that you can do is you can see all your pending requests. So these are all things that I've sort of just like mocked up that I'm waiting to hear back from. And then I can see my favorites here as well. Okay, so that's the gist of my app. This is something that's a work in progress and that I'm still continuing to develop. And before I leave, I just want to talk about why this idea was important to me. So being a young African-American male graduating from high school in 2008, life was really tough. And I did really well in high school, and the big thing I always wanted for myself was just to have a good job and take care of myself and sort of be like a responsible adult and all that stuff. What I found was that it was much more difficult than just that. The fact that I was on the honor roll, had a great ACT score, had all these awards, went to state and different events, none of those things really meant anything when I was knocking on doors trying to get a job. And it was really stressful and it was really concerning. And I know that a lot of people can relate to this, not just from being a minority, but for a lot of different things, whether you're a woman, underrepresented, or just someone who may, not be the most, you may not be like the top of someone's list. It's a feeling that we can all relate to in some way. I wanted to make an application that was more about the opportunity to help one another, right? So the idea is that with this application, I would encourage you and the people at this event to think about how you can help one another and leverage your relationships. I went to school with some incredible people. They were all really smart, innovative, great thinkers, and great personalities. And I know for sure that I would co-sign any of my peers if they needed me to be that person to write a recommendation for them. And I thought to myself, if I can do that, maybe that's something that we can all start to do for one another. Because you never know what your recommendation might do for another person. It could really change someone's life. And so that is the gist of my little presentation. Give, request, and save professional recommendations. And you don't need my app to do it. You can start doing it today. Okay, thank you. I know I turned it off, but were there any questions or anything?
What did you just write?
Yeah, so this was all done in React. Woohoo. Cool, thank you so much.
Awesome, thanks, Chiqui. Another round of applause. Perfect. Sorry, I'm trying to get my notes back here. Where did they go? Where did they go? Can't find them. Well, that's all right. I think our next presenter is, let's see, Arthur. Are you around? Perfect. Awesome. We've got you all set up right here. Just make sure we can see this code. There we go. Okay.
So, we're going to talk about some buzzwords. We're going to talk about parsing using big data in JavaScript to make decisions. Sounds kind of boring, sounds kind of mathy. Before we get onto that though, my name's Arthur Taylor. I'm a senior UI engineer at Target. Work in enterprise data, make some data type stuff, kind of mathy. So what is this that I'm going to talk about exactly? So about a year ago, I demoed something similar about what I'm going to show here. It takes loan data and it parses it, and I want to kind of show the process that's happened and kind of how we make decisions within this application. So to kind of start it off, let's take a look at the data that's actually being used to power this. So we can go to, everything's being run by Lending Club. We can take a look at the historical data that's being shown up here. We can download it, and to show it off briefly, this is all being done through, I think it's like, what does it say here? It's 2016 Q1. So these are all the loans that were finished in 2016 Q1. Why this is important is what we ended up doing is, in order to make a good decision on any kind of data point, you need historical data. You need to be able to say, okay, I'm going to take a look at specifically, let's say we want to make a decision point around grade. We need to be able to say, here's the historical data, here's what happened, here's how we make a determination that this is actually a good data point. Because we don't know if this is actually a good data point. Because there's a bunch of these in here. Let's see if we can find one. Or state. State may not be a good one. How do we know which one we make a good decision? Like we can actually make a good decision on. And by that I mean, let's say we have 100% as this is going to succeed as a loan. And we need to say, okay, this column right here makes up 1% of that 100% of success rate. So we need to find which ones are the highest percentage. Now, how we do that is we go a bit outside of JavaScript. What we did specifically was we used a program called Pandas in Python. And for this specific demo, what we found was when we were looking at grade, we found that anything after the D grade, the rate return on investment started to go to 0, which means we would be losing money no matter how many we could try and get the law of large numbers in there, which means we can buy a bunch of them and hope to make some kind of return, but we would end up losing money no matter what we did. So we decided on, okay, we're going to go with, we want to make 10%, and if we figure that D is going to go negative, B around grade B and then subgrade B2 is kind of the sweet spot. So between B2 and B3 is kind of where we decided this is where we're going to kind of hit. So now we have this data point that we want to hit. We want to hit loan grade. Now we got to find out. Actually, I got to get live data kind of going on here. So to go back to this API, we have, this is a list of every data point that we can hit. And this is kind of a giant list. And what's even larger is once you look at every single loan available, that's when we start getting into some big data. And it kind of questions, how do I make sense of all this? Especially when I'm going through and saying, it's an HTTP request to get all this data. And I could go through as some kind of backend kind of channel, be that Python, Java, PHP, but it's JavaScript. That's what we're going to do. And especially when we get into the kind of competitive scene, which I'll talk about near the end, that's when we have to start doing some things that are a bit out of the box. Start looking at maybe some low-level, maybe even packet-level data. So to kind of go right into it, what we ended up doing was we have an application here. The way that we worked it was it's essentially a giant router. So we come in and we just started, this is the basic like non-competitive loans that we're working on. So we start up our service, and for this demo, we're not trying to do anything fancy. I have this running on a server at my house. It's been running for, I've had it running on Google Cloud for about a year, but my credits got used up, so I threw it on my own server. But basically what this is doing is running, the new loans are listed, and it's running a job every time they're listed. It's like every 4 hours every day, and that's what it's doing. But for this specific purpose, we're just trying to find some basic data. And to kind of show what that looks like real fast, this is going to run through the program and kind of show you what I see as an output. And this is everything that we're seeing, and what we can do with it. This is all the information that we're seeing we can make decisions on. Just to kind of show you, so when we have all that data, and that's everything that's kind of, there's a lot of stuff going on here. Like I don't know how to do all that. Look at that and make a decision. So what that does is it starts up our loan service, and then this is where things kind of get interesting. What we do is we have our rules that we applied, so we have our grade that we looked at. Let's see, where is it? So what it does is it runs through this JSON, and we have in this all the rules that we have applied, or that we found out that we want to actually make a decision point on. This is a bit more complicated than what I've talked about, but this is kind of, I've just decided this is good. So let's see here. So these are the ones that we've determined are critical, which means these all have to pass in order to say, yeah, this is a good loan. We want to do something with it. And it's really basic stuff, like it's being verified by the IRS. I don't want some guy saying he makes $1 million and trying to get a loan. And they also have to have a credit score of like 700. So what it's doing in our loan service is it's running through each one of these critical ones, and we're just doing some basic filtering on it. If it's meeting the number of rules that are in there, -1, it's saying, okay, this is good to continue on. And then we're running our secondary, and these are much more arbitrary, very, I don't really know what's in here, I haven't looked at it in a while, but joint debt-to-income ratio, the purpose, stuff like that. So it's doing all this. And as I mentioned, this isn't a very competitive one, so it doesn't really matter. Time doesn't really matter. It doesn't really care how long it takes to run. So to kind of take a look at one that we actually do care about that runs, and this is where things kind of start getting interesting, and why I chose specifically Node and JavaScript to do this in. So what we're doing, so I'm going to take a wild guess and say the vast majority of people, when you make an HTTP call, what you do is you make the call, you wait for it to get done, then you do something on it. But this specific call that we're doing to this endpoint could take around 10, 15, 20, 30 seconds. And that's unacceptable when you're dealing with high frequency trading, people on Wall Street, people who have money, millions of dollars to throw around. They're finishing this type of thing in milliseconds. So what we decided to do was, back when I talked about low-level information, what we do is once we obtain some kind of data, so basically we're using the request, and then once we get data, at any point, what we're doing is we're taking that, we're decoding that using the string decoder. And what it's doing is it's in a CSV format, so we're compiling this string together until we can validate that it's a perfect, or it's a CSV string that can be validated. And then what we're doing is we're running it through that other program again. That just takes the loan information and just runs it through that engine. And this one I'm still working on a bit, but it's pretty competitive and not very easy to work at. So this all kind of correlates or compounds into something I find very interesting is how do we find out if something actually works? And I'm still working on that. I would show you, but it has actual financial information in there. But I think that's everything for me. Questions, comments?
What was the name of the Python tool?
Pandas.
Pandas, just like the animal?
Yep, just like the animal. If you're interested in that kind of area, you can take a look at R too. It has a lot of the same stuff in there, the programming language R. But Python's is pretty standard.
So I was just wondering more about what motivated Python to do. Is it like, I want to use this section of money and not use that?
It's twofold. One, someone actually in my workspace did this before me, and I'm kind of a person who's like, I like doing things just to see if I can do them. So that's how it started, and I kind of morphed from there, and then it started going into, when I just create projects to see if I can do them to make money. So I have a few different things kind of like this that I'm working on at any given time, but it's mostly around, I just like seeing if I can do something. I'm sorry?
Is this actually being used to make loan decisions?
Yeah, so I have about 50 loans that I actually made decisions on with this program. Again, kind of like I said, I'd show you, but it actually had. I had to show you. Let's see here. So this is kind of, hopefully it didn't log me out. Yeah, it did. Okay, so it logged me out, and I don't want to share my passwords and all that. But yeah, so I have about 50 loans that I made decisions on. It's still a work in progress. I have had some that haven't been great, but I've had more at this point that are good than bad. If anyone knows Python pandas in here, I'd love to talk to you. The person I was working with, they kind of ghosted me. So I'm kind of in a spot where I'm trying. I talked about it at the beginning where we made a decision on the subgrade. So I have that data point, and I'm trying to learn pandas in Python where I can make other decisions on other data points. But that's kind of where I'm at right now. Thank you, everyone.
Awesome. Thanks, Arthur. That was great. Let's see. So our final lightning talk of the evening is Michael de Vera.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Wallpaper's up here, but we're going to actually use that later. So, okay, good. Just don't have to wear anything.
And my glasses. Hi guys, I'm Michael de Vera. I'm an independent contractor, a senior software engineer. I've been very fortunate working around the Twin Cities, working on big major sites. I have a big portfolio, doing brand new websites from scratch. They range from Fortune 500 companies to small companies. And I just recently finished up a mobile application
for a health company here in Minneapolis, using React Native, and then my websites were all done in React. So that's about me. And I have my Master's of Science in Software Engineering, and I did that years ago. So today I'm up here to talk about the journey I've been having regarding asynchronous calls. Now I know promises are out there, but it wasn't until I was assigned a task to figure out what Redux middleware should we use, because there's quite a few out there. There's the Redux promise middleware, there's the Redux thunk middleware, and then there's the Redux saga middleware. But this word thunk got me going. I was like, what is this thunk all about? So today, I want to show you what a thunk is. I'll reason with you how this thunk works. And much to my surprise, I couldn't believe how simple and straightforward it is. But it is used quite a bit. And if you understand this thunk design pattern, you're going to appreciate promises a whole lot better. In addition, you're going to appreciate what the Redux thunk middleware is doing. So what is a thunk? I'm going to be honest with you, I don't know. I went out there looking all over the place to figure out what is the origin of thunk. I know you guys are laughing at me, but I'll reason with you with what this code does. And it's a thunk design pattern. So I don't want to mislead you. But it is heavily used in promises, and it is in the Redux thunk middleware. And I don't know if anyone does React here, but most of the times when you want to manage state, you use Redux. And that's sometimes not good enough. You're going to add another library on top of that called the Redux thunk middleware, or saga middleware, or promise middleware. But in my situation, we went with the Redux thunk middleware. But in JavaScript, what you're going to do is you're going to use Closure to manage state. And you're going to use a function that is wrapped around a callback. And when that callback is sent back to you, the response is hydrated. So that's the benefit of a thunk. So in my demo, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make some API calls, and I'll show you how I'm doing this. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do 4 different API calls. And I made a fake AJAX just to represent 4 different calls. 1 to get the greeting, 1 to get the audience, 1 to get the day of the song of the day, or the day, and then the song of the day, sorry. For people who know me, I have this thing about quoting songs every time we're in a meeting. There's something that sparks some sort of topic, and then I could relate it to a song. So like, for example, when you're in these stand-up meetings, everyone wants you to stand up. Well, what's the song that usually pops up in our minds, especially for the older crowd? You know, Get Up, Stand Up, Bob Marley, right? So today's song of the day is Every Day's Halloween by Ministry. I don't know if anyone knows that song, but because it is Halloween today, this is an old song that was made in the early 80s. Okay, so this is what we're going to do. We're going to call hello first. I'm sorry, we're going to call greeting first, audience, day, and then song of the day. We want to make sure those come in the order that we really want it to come. This is the code right here. So let's talk about a few things. Can you guys see this okay, or do I need to? Okay. So let's talk about a set of functions that I have in here to make this happen. Let's talk about this fake AJAX. So what I'm really doing is I'm just, again, pretending like I'm calling a database. So here's the key that you're passing in, and I'm going to return back a callback eventually to you. So what I'm doing is I'm saying this key, if you're asking for greeting, I'm going to return back hello. That's all I'm really doing. But before I send that back to you, I'm going to put this random delay on this callback. So this set timeout is just going to use some sort of random delay that's just automatically generated with this math random and some additional parameters associated to it. So it just randomly sends back some data back to you. So the other function that I have in here actually calls this fake AJAX. So in here, what we're going to do is we're going to have this closure variable handle the state. And so what I'd like to do is kind of skip over this for right now because this is invoking the
function, when we invoke this function, I'll step through this so that you can follow it through. Then I have another function here that says I'll put the actual text that was returned back from the callback. So it's either going to show hello everyone, today is Halloween, and then the song of the day. And then here are my thunks. So I have a thunk 1, thunk 2, thunk 3, and thunk 4. The goal of this is to actually have this come back in order the way I want it to come back, which is to say, call thunk 1 first, and once thunk 1 is done, I want you to follow my callback and then output the text before you actually go to thunk 2. Does this look familiar? So this is the design pattern. This is what's underneath the promises. This is what's underneath the Redux thunk middleware. So how does this all work? Okay, so I am calling a function that is wrapped around a callback. So here's my get object. My get object is right up here. And in return, we're going to get a callback with the actual information that we need. So to do that, what we're going to do is call thunk1, and we're going to set up a callback. So here's a arrow function. That's my callback to get the answer back from the fake Ajax call. So let's step through this this get object, because this is the meat of it, right here. So here is that closed variable that we're going to handle, and this is all going to be in the execution context. If you guys ever study about execution context, you might, if you haven't, I'm sorry, you might want to look into that a little bit more. But that's what goes into the stack. And then in that stack, this response is going to be managed to say, hey, do I have a response to get back or a callback to invoke? Okay, so let's say, for example, I come in here and I send in greeting. And the fake Ajax, or the get object gets that greeting. So here's the key. We set this response up. I'm going to set up a bridge here that says handle a fast Ajax call versus a slow Ajax call. Let's talk about the fast Ajax call. So in the fast Ajax call, we're going to call fake Ajax. We're going to pass in the key of greeting. We're obviously going to step through this here, and we're going to call fake Ajax. We're going to pass up a key, which is greeting. And then here's my callback, which is this actual arrow function down here. And what's going to happen when it's fast, okay, is that it's going to say, hey, I ran so fast that I actually fell into this callback right here. And if there is no response in here, this was never set. Because that was never set, then I'm going to set it to the text that was received back from the callback of the Ajax call. That's all it's doing. Setting the text of this guy right here. A fast Ajax response, the next thing that's going to happen is going to return this function, and it's going to notice that the response has got something to call, send back to the invocator. And so now all we're going to do is do a callback with the response and actually output that right here. Does anyone have any questions in regards to that? You're handling a fast Ajax response with this. And you're not adding any more time complexity, any space complexity with this solution. There's other people that actually have used recursion. So they'll do something like, if my object is not empty, return that object. But if it is empty, they'll do a recursion. They'll call the function again until that object's populated. So there's time complexity with that because you're setting out more timeouts to it and you're adding to the stack. I don't have a sample of that, but have you guys ever seen that before in someone's solution? I have to admit, I've done it, but until I saw, and when I saw this design, I'm like, oh, I'm never doing that again. Okay, so let's talk about a slow Ajax response. So you call fake Ajax, you called in greeting, and it hasn't returned yet. And because it hasn't returned yet, you never fall back into this callback right here. You never do. But the next line will run, and it's simply going to set the response of the callback that was sent up So you're setting this response to be the callback. Because what will happen is that once this fake Ajax really comes back, it's going to say, because it's not empty, right? Because the callback was set down here. Again, fake Ajax took a long time. And because it took a long time, the only thing that we really did is we set this state right here to be the callback, to get itself ready to actually execute or run once there is text to come back. So once that text comes back, all it's really going to do is run your callback with the text that was given by this fake Ajax call. And then now you get the output and you can go on to the next one. Is everyone getting this okay? Everyone's kind of shaking their head and they're smiling. I don't know if it's this a good thing or a bad thing. So you guys probably want to see how this runs. For showing the seconds, I did show this up here just to prove out the concept. So it looks like the first one's going to take a while. So you can see here, the greeting took what, 3 to 4 seconds almost? And then when that finished, it immediately called everyone in about 2 seconds. And then the next one was today's Halloween. Again, I'm getting this in order, the way I want it to be. And then I'm getting the song of the day, exactly in the order that I want it to happen. This is what's happening underneath the thunk. I'm sorry, underneath the promise. This is what's happening underneath Redux thunk middleware.
So I noticed there were 2 posts, basically. I don't know if that was coincidence, and that's what I saw. Is there a way you could get each of the thunks to post immediately? So there's 4 posts instead? And I saw 2 groups of printers.
Yeah, one was slower. It must have been really slow for this one right here before it outputted.
And it output both.
Yep, it output both, and it probably just because the other one was really quick. Yeah.
So that was just coincidence.
It's just coincidence. Yeah, I'm not, as you can see here.
I think maybe just to reiterate the point of the thumb is that you can control the order of the asynchronous callbacks.
That's right. That's exactly it. Thank you. And I try to stress that through my presentation here. So hello. So first thing I get, everyone. Today's Halloween, and then the song of the day is every day's Halloween by history.
What would be a situation where you find this useful?
Yeah, I actually, that's a good question. Thank you for asking. It happens to be the last one of the questions. If you're creating your own library, if you want to compete against the promise, the native promise in JavaScript, you want to do something better other than what's already given to you, I would say use this design pattern. Don't use it every day though, because the promise offers you other APIs, right? So, for example, I saw a lot of the guys' code up here. You're doing a promise, you're doing some sort of API call, and then you do a .then. Well, that's a feature of promise. If you were to use this pattern, you'd have to do a .then somewhere in here. You'd have to rewrite that whole thing, if that's making any sense. The other thing that's really beneficial about promises is, as you know, with HTTP response codes, either between 200 and 299, you're going to automatically fall into the accepted response. Anything between 300 and 500, you're automatically going to fall into the on-error response. So on those things, you know, you've got some good features and promises, but underneath it, it's still a thunk. But if you were to go, if you went to the Silicon Valley and you're writing your own library, we don't want. I'm sorry, I know Minneapolis pretty well. Maybe I don't know it too well. I don't know anyone here that are writing their own libraries. Is there anyone here writing their own libraries? Oh, are you writing your own libraries?
Well, of course. I mean, I think with any application, you're going to end up writing your own libraries for many sorts of things that you don't want to rely on external dependencies.
Okay. Okay. And that's what I'm saying. So if you write your own libraries, this is where you would write. You would use a thumb design pattern. Otherwise, just use someone else's. Right?
Is this code available somewhere so you can take the time to look at it?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'll post it on the main thread if that's okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, like the speaker before had the obfuscation, right? So think of it this way: if you want to write a pattern that will actually handle 500 errors and parse out the value from that and act normal, if you want to do everything backward, you would have to implement this yourself and change the behavior. So that's the type of thing. Is what special behavior do you have that doesn't come in the standard process?
Right. And then from a Redux thump middleware, if any one of you guys are implementing that, you're doing a dispatch, right? And then that action, you call you dispatch for an action, and you make sure that action is fully hydrated with everything that you need. If you don't have this kind of stuff with your Redux, you're going to have some contention problems. So yet there's another library you have to add on top of Redux, and this is one of them. Saga is another one, which uses the generators. We can go deep into that, but those are cool too, because those are yielding to the next response on the next line. So, but anyway, this journey of mine of trying to figure out asynchronous, how to manage asynchronous costs, it's huge, especially in this whole JavaScript world. If you understand this pattern, and I have a mentor is right here, Joel. He's out of Silicon Valley, he's out of Stanford, everything. So him and I are always together and just always like, you know, what is this really doing? Why are we doing it this way? Once we figure it out, it's like, oh, let's refactor some of our code. There was one example that we did work on where we did use this halfway through, but then decided to go another route. But when you guys do like, if you pull a big file down, like a big image file, and you want to read attributes about that image, most of the times you'll do a file object, right? And then you byte stream that down, and then when it's finally down, you can read some properties off of it, like the height, the width, whatever. Well, you're not going to get that information until it's fully hydrated on the client. That's where you would probably use the thumb. You'd say, go get that file, and once that file is fully down onto my client side, then I read the attributes. That's an async call. And that's where you could use the thumb. That's my journey. That's what I'm presenting today. Thanks for giving me some time.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks, Michael.
Yeah.
Well, that's our show for the evening. Thanks again to our speakers, Jonathan, Jackie, Arthur, and Michael. Can you get another round of applause from them? If you have an idea that you'd like to come and share with the group at some point in the future, I would encourage you to reach out to any of the organizers or email us at javascriptmn@gmail.com. That info is also on our website. You can also catch us in Slack, the whole 9 yards. And we'll set up a time because it's really awesome and we love having people from the community up here. Everyone you saw, I believe up here today, has been in JSMN before. So look, I think there's like a mathematical proof that's like, or a philosophical thing, I don't know. Take your pick, whichever discipline you prefer, that like, if everyone up here was once a member from JavaScript MN, therefore everyone who has showed up to a JavaScript MN can also be up here. Post ergo propter, whatever, you know. It's math, I swear, right? Yeah, I swear it's math. Wow, what else is there? Special shout out again to our sponsors, Space 150, Front-End Masters, Twilio, Trap.js, CH Robinson, and Doherty Consulting. I'm Brandon Johnson. Your other organizers here were Anna Baker, Robert Toome, Randall Meeker. We'll see you all next month. We're still in the process of planning what November will look like. but I think we'll have an awesome event for you there as well. I know we've now set a dangerous precedent of having this on something that can kind of sort of be considered a holiday, but I promise we're not having it on Thanksgiving. I can make that guarantee. We hope to see you here next time. Thank you. You're awesome. Take care.